In outer space, there's a fiery mass of rock and metal 5 miles wide. It is coming at 30,000 miles per hour. Earth is in the way. Meteor.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that's...
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
You found the American International Podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jeff Markin.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And this week we're looking way up to the impending doom that is Meteor from 1979.
Meteor was directed by Ronald Neame from a screenplay by Stanley Mann and Edmund H. North, which came from a story by Theodore Parvin and Edmund H. North, and it was produced by Theodore Parvin and Arnold Orgolini for Meteor Productions and released by American International Pictures.
Meteor stars Sean Connery as Dr. Paul Bradley, Natalie Wood as Tatiana Donskaya, Karl Malden as Harry Sherwood, Brian Keith as Dr. Alexei Dubov, Martin Landau as General Adlon, Trevor Howard as Sir Michael Hughes, Richard Dysart as Secretary of Defense.
It also stars Henry Fonda as the President, Joseph Campanella as General Easton, Bo Brundon as Rolf Mannheim, Roger Robinson as Bill Hunter, Michael Zaslow as Sam Mason, Phoebe Bush as Helen Bradley, and Sybil Danning as the skier.
She's actually credited as the girl skier.
I know, but I tried to not be sexist.
Because there's a boy skier, too.
Oh, yeah, there is a boy skier who gets avalanched.
Meteor starts, surprisingly enough, in space. There's a lot of it. You see some stars, and there's actually a little bit of mist appearing, too.
Yeah, our POV is a trail of comet dust as the credits zoom past us. And then a voiceover tells us that outer space is limitless and timeless, filled with cosmic explosions and endless turbulence, and we get graphic depictions of the same. The narration continues. Space is an infinite playground for that occasional blazing visitor, the comet.
At first, comets terrified man. He thought they were signals of impending catastrophe, but he got used to them, and he gave names to them, and waited for them to drop by, like old friends.
He had them in for tea, and they slept with his wife.
This one has come from behind the sun, moving across the heavens at 108,000 miles an hour, and has never before been seen by man.
Kind of confused me because this isn't a movie about comets, but this is an important prologue, I guess.
And then we move on, and the narrator tells us about the asteroid belt, a vast junkyard of metal and rock orbiting the sun between Jupiter and Mars. Thousands of fragments, some as small as a fist, some as large as a city, and amongst these, Orpheus, 20 miles in diameter and undisturbed for countless generations, until now.
Dun dun dun. Then we get our title, Meteor. It's extra bold. And then we have a very strange dissolve where it seems like a sailboat is careening through outer space, but it's just a really, really slow fade.
Captaining this schooner is a smiling Sean Connery, playing Dr. Paul Bradley.
This is a race, and he and his team are in it to win it. That is, until a Coast Guard ship pulls up alongside their schooner. Sirens blaring.
Paul grabs a megaphone to talk to them to see what it is they want. The Coast Guard ship says that they've been sent by NASA to pick up Dr. Paul Bradley, and is he on board? Paul tells him this isn't a good time, he's trying to win a race here, but the Coast Guard's orders are clear.
Dr. Paul objects, but the guardsman threatens to cut across his bow, so Dr. Paul relents and agrees to come in. And then a title font tells us that this is Monday.
Now on land, Paul is being escorted to a car. The Coast Guard official tells Paul that there's a plane to Houston waiting for him. As Paul enters the vehicle, he asks the guardsman if he would have really cut across his bow. The official says yes.
Then I would have rhymed you.
And gone straight to the bottom, sir, says the official with a salute.
Dr. Paul turns a fiery glare on the guardsman as the car he just sat in whisks him away. Now we're at NASA's Lyndon Johnson Space Center, where Dr. Paul is dropped off in front of the building, and he tells his driver to wait for him as he trots up the stairs and inside. Inside an outer office, Dr. Paul sees a secretary, whose name is Gladys. She tells him that he owes her $10. She got her handicap down in golf. Paul notices that he has a packed bag sitting in the chair across from her. It's yours, she confirms, as he goes into the inner office.
Going in, Paul sees Harry Sherwood, played by Karl Malden, waiting for him, and there are others in attendance, including General Easton, played by Joseph Campanella, and Sam Mason, the commander at NASA, and Peter Watson, a flight director.
Sam Mason was really familiar to me from the soap opera world. He was on Guiding Light for generations, and he was also on One Life to Live, which is where I saw him.
Harry offers scotch and tells everyone to take a seat at the table as he begins to debrief Paul on what's going on. Paul says he left NASA 5 years ago and wants to know why he's back here now. Harry hands Paul his drink and invites the others to help themselves to the bar. Then Harry explains that a new comet has been discovered. This one was headed towards the asteroid belt.
At that time, the Challenger 2 space module, which was tasked with exploring Mars and staffed by General Easton's son Tom, amongst others, was nearby. So Harry said he changed their program so that they could be nearby this upcoming cosmic collision.
And we see in flashback how the conversation went down. The Challenger crew asks how this change in plans will affect the mission. Commander Sam Mason tells them about the comet, and they want Challenger to head towards the asteroid belt and park beside Vespa, and take lots of pictures.
Tom Easton asked Sam to tell his dad hello for him, even though his dad is standing right there watching.
And then we return to present day. Harry again says that this all took place last Friday. Then yesterday, Sunday at 1100 hours, Challenger pulled up alongside Vespa as planned.
Okay, now back on the Challenger, the crew is there taking pictures. This is, again, Sunday morning. They waited there for 90 minutes until the comet hits. And as anyone with half a brain might anticipate, when a comet bashes into a meteor, there's going to be some debris scattering everywhere. And that indeed is what happens.
As the astronauts watch and the command center watches the video link, the comet hits Orpheus, and Orpheus is blasted into pieces. Everyone watches helplessly as the fragments fly out.
As Sam, General Easton, Harry, etc., look on in silent horror, doing absolutely nothing, a massive chunk of Orpheus hurtles itself towards the module.
In reality, it probably happened hours ago because of the speed of the video link.
As it's about to hit, the astronauts drift away from the window, but that didn't really help anything. The chunk obliterates the spacecraft. The camera zeroes in on General Easton's unemotional face. Back in the present, Harry Monday morning quarterbacks his call. He should have figured... ...
General Easton tells Harry he shouldn't feel guilty. We'd all have given the same orders, he says. The news has not yet gone public, but Harry is going to have to put out a press release as soon as they're done with this meeting. Paul wants to know why he's been called in, and that's when Harry drops the bombshell. A chunk of Orpheus, a pretty sizable one, is headed towards Earth. There are a bunch of smaller fragments coming along with it, but they needn't be too concerned about those ones. It's the big one they're worried about.
And it's going to hit in 6 days. Dr. Paul yells, "That is why we put Hercules up there."
Hercules is an armed satellite, officially meant to destroy any incoming dangers, such as this one, but unofficially to point weapons at the enemies of the U.S.
Harry has more to say, though. He has convened a meeting at NASA HQ in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. Harry wants Paul there.
Harry spouts off a list of names of which Paul is familiar to try to entice him to come to this meeting.
Harry hands Dr. Paul a dossier of facts about Orpheus for his plane reading material, and then tells him his room is booked and Gladys at the front desk has all his financial arrangements. Paul picks up his bag and in clipped tones says he will attend the meeting. "Why don't you stick a broom up my ass? I can sweep the carpet on my way out."
Oh, your Sean Connery is terrible.
I know. Well, why don't you say it then?
"Why don't you stick a broom up my ass? I could sweep the carpet on my way out."
He departs, throwing another steely glare back at Harry.
In the next scene, Paul arrives at his hotel in Washington. He's greeted by a man dressed in green and wearing a top hat, probably giving Sean Connery flashbacks to Darby O'Gill and the Little People. In his hotel room, Paul switches on the TV, where the big news is that Dr. Paul Bradley dropped out of the sailboat race. This is despite the fact that a press release was allegedly put out that the shuttle Challenger 2 was destroyed.
Nobody cares about that. After hearing his name mentioned for forfeiting the race, he turns the volume down on the TV. His soon-to-be ex-wife has put a note in his luggage that says, "What's going on?" So he picks up the phone and calls her.
He asked her how the kids are doing, and she seems to want to chat, but Paul can't really discuss what he's doing in Washington, so he hangs up.
He tries to read his dossier, but then focuses on the hotel room's ceiling lamp, which dissolves into an orbiting satellite packed to the gills with missiles. They looked a little alike. Harry's warning about Orpheus echoes in his head. Then we see the titular meteor as it slowly hurtles earthward.
Now it's Tuesday. The destroyed shuttle is on the front page of the paper. I guess that sailboat race is yesterday's news.
Dr. Paul's reading it in the back of a car on his way to the meeting.
When he gets there, he enters the conference room to find that he's the only one in the room.
Well, there's some cool space shuttle models there, too.
Harry bursts through the door and apologizes for being late.
"So is everyone else," says Paul.
Either they're in the wrong room or no one else is coming. Harry confesses that no one else is coming. He never called anybody else. All he needs is Paul because he was the one who launched Hercules. But Paul has some issues with the way things have been handled with Hercules since his exit from NASA.
He's still salty.
It currently has its 14 missiles pointed toward Russia, and that was not its intended purpose.
Harry gets snippy right back at Dr. Paul. "That meteor is 5 miles wide and it's definitely going to hit us." "Shit," says Paul.
"Shit."
And then the two discuss strategy. A General Adlon is going to be a problem, as are about 100 other government types who are more worried about the political ramifications of turning Hercules on the meteor instead of Russia.
So Harry wants Paul to help him get things moving along so Hercules can be used in the way it was originally intended. It will take some doing because of the politics involved, but this is a matter of life and death.
"Those rockets have got to be realigned, and we have exactly 5 days," he says. And now we're in Russia, as a Dr. Dubov is talking to some government officials about how Orpheus could obliterate Russia. But when he suggests that they call the U.S. government, he's immediately shot down. They can't do that without the chairman's okay.
In a meeting in Washington, the same sentiment is being held against the Russians. Harry, Paul, General Easton, and several other men are sitting at a conference table, headed by the Secretary of Defense. Contacting the Russians will not be under consideration without the Secretary's say-so. Harry says he's sure the Russians are likely aware of the meteor and are probably wondering what the U.S. is doing about it, which at that moment is nothing. That's the purpose of this meeting, to figure out what they're going to do. Harry proposes the obvious solution is to use Hercules, as per its original intention. But General Adlon, played by Martin Landau, is against the idea. The U.S. government has never admitted to the existence of Hercules, and since it's being used in contradiction to every peace treaty ever signed, the admission of its existence would be a great source of embarrassment to the country. But Harry says this is bigger than all of that.
Secretary of Defense says this meeting is for figuring out what to do. Nothing's been decided yet, but Harry says Hercules is the only thing that they can use. Then he and General Adlon start sniping at each other. General Adlon doesn't like the idea of the public calling them liars and warmongers. Harry thinks they'll be even less thrilled to find out that a meteor is going to destroy the Earth unless they know that the government has a plan to fight it. Then the Secretary of Defense asks for Paul to describe the devastation Orpheus will cause.
Paul says they have a 5-mile piece of rock traveling at 30,000 miles per hour. Its striking force would be equal to 2,500,000 megatons of TNT.
That's 10 orders of magnitude greater than the largest earthquake ever recorded.
It would throw 5 billion tons of Earth into the atmosphere, block a fair amount of sunlight, and likely bring about another ice age.
General Adlon thinks that Harry could be wrong. He was wrong when he sent that shuttle to the asteroid belt, and Harry is affronted. I don't have to listen to this, he shouts as everyone starts bickering at the table.
Paul stands up and grabs his jacket from a coat stand. The Secretary of Defense asks him where he's going. I need air, says Paul. He's done his job. He's told them what would happen if the meteor hits. Now it's up to them to decide what to do about it. When they're ready for him, Paul tells them he'll be in the bar across the street.
Once he's gone, the Secretary of Defense tells the others that he's got to run this by the President. Harry reminds the Secretary that there's not much time. And then we see the meteor still on the way. We keep cutting to that. Not really an impressive-looking hunk of rock, is it?
Now we're at the bar with Paul, and we see on the television that the BBC has gone live with the meteor story. Paul is having a drink, and Harry comes in to join him. And then on the television, the American reporter comes back on and says he considers it deplorable that they're getting their news from the BBC while the U.S. government has so far declined to address the situation. Harry considers it deplorable that he's been sitting at the bar for over 2 seconds now, and he doesn't have a drink in front of him. So Paul orders him a drink.
Harry tells Dr. Paul that they are letting the president decide what to do. What if he says no? Asks Dr. Paul. Harry tells a long-winded story about how his son has a stomach ache, and when a doctor recommended an appendectomy, his wife wanted to wait and see if the kid got better on his own. But when she was asleep, he took the kid to the hospital and had them perform the surgery.
The next day, his wife was happy that everything turned out okay. You get my point? Asks Harry. Paul smiles and nods. Then he asks how they can get the nuclear warheads on Hercules repositioned without Harry's wife knowing about it.
Harry says he'll do it. That's the only way. And then someone calls the bar for Harry. After taking the call, he and Paul go back to work. In the next scene, Harry's on the phone with the Secretary of Defense as Paul reads a printout that confirms Hercules is light. We'll find out what that means in a sec.
So now they're meeting in the Oval Office with President Henry Fonda. The president is in an awkward position. Even if they admit to the existence of Hercules, the rockets they have won't be enough to keep the meteor from its current trajectory. They'll need even more rockets. He asks the Secretary of Defense if they have more rockets. Not in space, sir, he says. Then what are we supposed to do? Asked the president. Harry asks if the president will confirm that the Russians have their own version of Hercules with missiles pointed toward the U.S.
Yes, but they'll never admit it, says President Henry Fonda.
And Paul says that they will need the combined weaponry from both satellites to destroy the meteor.
Harry thinks that they can make Russia cooperate on this. President Henry Fonda puts Dr. Paul in charge of Hercules for the duration of the crisis and tells General Adlon give him every assistance. Adlon says, I hope I'm public-spirited enough, and President Fonda cuts him off. I'm sure you are. And then Harry tells President Fonda that they're flying to New York City tonight.
The president tells him to listen to his press conference that evening. He believes he's got a solution to their problem. That evening, the president makes the official statement on the meteor and says that the country's greatest minds are already working on a solution. They have had the foresight to launch an armed defense satellite with its weapons pointed towards space to prevent the arrival of any foreign element that might enter the Earth's atmosphere on a course for destruction. It has been named Hercules. But, he continues, the firepower on Hercules isn't going to be enough for the matter at hand. But fortunately, the Russians are known to have a similar satellite of their own orbiting the Earth. He doesn't know what they call it, but the U.S. government is aware of its existence, and the combined firepower from both satellites just might be enough to save the planet.
Over at the Kremlin, the Russians watch the American president peer pressure them into helping. On the plane, Dr. Paul, watching the president, says the game is on. In the Kremlin, the chairman says that they will agree to discussions with the United States and that Dr. Dubov will attend. Dr. Dubov says the Volga is about to overflow its banks and we're arguing about swimming lessons. And then the phone rings in the Kremlin and the chairman answers. It's the president of the United States on the phone for him.
And now it's Wednesday and the meteor continues its trajectory towards Earth. And back on Earth, we're in New York City, specifically the American Telegraph and Telephone Company. Dr. Paul and Harry check in and head down the elevator to where they're going to be headquartered.
This is a subterranean operation room built next to an old subway tunnel under the Hudson River. This is apparently a better solution logistically than setting up a control room in Houston. No one would ever believe that they'd set up rocket launching capability here under the busiest city in the world.
They exit the elevator and are met by General Adlon. The general informs him that the Russian scientist is due to arrive and voices his displeasure in inviting the Russians into their facility.
No one cares.
Then he takes Paul around to introduce him to the crew. He meets Rolf Mannheim, chief technician, Jan Watkins, trajectory analysis officer, and her quote-unquote assistant, Alan Marshall, and Bill Hunter in charge of trekking.
Bill interrupts to say that there's a Sir Michael Hughes from the Jodrell Bank Observatory who wants to speak with Dr. Paul. Sir Michael says that the first splinters from the meteor will hit in 24 hours, and that they're hard to track unless they come in clusters, but they're over there trying their best.
Beyond that, he's just calling to make contact. Then Harry returns to tell Paul that Dr. Dubov will be arriving at 7:30 that evening.
And then we see the Russians land in New York City, and Dr. Dubov is warmly greeted by Harry. And we know this because Dr. Dubov's interpreter translates for him. Her name is Tatiana Donskaya, played by Natalie Wood.
Now it's Thursday, and Dr. Dubov is meeting with General Adlon and their respective translators. Dubov is inquiring as to Hercules' specs and firepower, but General Adlon is reluctant to give out that information, advising that Dubov speak with Dr. Bradley. Paul and Harry enter. 14 rockets, each carrying a 100-megaton bomb, Paul volunteers. He greets Dr. Dubov with a handshake and asks why so many translators are necessary. Adlon says it's established procedure for each member to have their own translator to ensure that things are being translated correctly. Paul says that the first thing they need to do is to start trusting each other. And if it's of no difference to anyone else, they'll take the prettier of the two translators.
Tatiana blushes. Harry introduces her. Her name is Tatiana Donskaya, and she's an astrophysicist and Dr. Dubov's English voice. Adlon's translator is introduced, but Adlon's feelings are hurt, so he says that since they're redundant there, they'll go and asks to talk to Harry outside of the office. Harry vows to calm Adlon down. Through Tatiana, Dr. Dubov tells Dr. Paul that Adlon is not pleased to see him.
Outside the office, Harry tells General Adlon that he knows this is a difficult position for him, but Adlon cuts him off, saying that he's spoken to the Secretary of Defense, and he's been told that under no circumstances are the rockets on Hercules to be realigned until the Russians admit to having their own satellite, and will agree to realign their rockets as well. Harry tells him to make 100 copies of that memo, schedule 100 meetings to discuss it, and by that time, the meteor will have hit, and it will no longer be an issue.
There'll be nothing to argue about anymore. Through Tatiana, Dr. Dubov quips to Dr. Paul that the U.S. will have a hard time hitting the meteor with their rockets aimed at Russia. Dr. Paul admits that the U.S. system is called Hercules and asks for the cutesy name that the Russians have given their rockets. Dubov coyly asks how one can name something that does not exist.
Then who put up the satellite called Peter the Great? Its warheads pointed at the United States, asks Paul, pointing to a map of known satellites orbiting the Earth.
Peter the Great is represented by a glowing red star.
Dubov suggests it might have been the Chinese, and Paul sighs. If Peter the Great does not exist, they're out of business. But if it does exist, Paul would need to know what it's carrying and what frequencies they'd have to use to align it with Hercules. In the purposes of discussion only, Dubov says through Tatiana that if he were involved in the creation of such an illegal weapon, then he could theoretically answer these questions.
Dubov is fine with talking in the hypothetical and tells him that, theoretically, Peter the Great is armed with 16 rockets, each carrying the same megatonnage as the U.S. rockets are carrying. Dr. Dubov grins like he's very pleased with himself as Tatiana translates this for Dr. Paul. That gives us $1 billion plus, Dr. Paul says. Theoretically.
Dr. Dubov smiles again and raises his eyebrows.
Theoretically, Dubov agrees in English.
Now it's Friday and we're somewhere snowy, apparently Siberia. A man walks back to his hut and he sees the meteor in the sky. He goes inside with his family, but then goes back out to look at the meteor. He calls to his wife. She gathers the children and the family flees as the meteor crashes behind a mountain.
And now we're at the United Nations, where the Canadian delegate reports to everyone that there was an earthquake-style disturbance in Siberia and calls on the Russian delegate to give more details. The Russian delegate requests a recess so he can consult his countrymen before divulging any more information. And the meteor is still on its way.
And now we're back at the U.S. Underground Control Center, and Alan, Jan's assistant, is asking her about the Russian interpreter. Jan says she's very nice, very pretty, and to forget about her. Then she turns and gives Alan a kiss. So apparently, he's not only assisting in the workplace.
Jan hands a report to Dr. Paul and Dr. Dubov, then tells Tatiana that she made a few improvements to her living quarters. Tatiana admires Jan's scarf. Well, they're already gal pals. That's so cute. Jan leaves, and Dr. Dubov tells Tatiana that he needs a nap, and so he lies down on a couch. It's right there. Tatiana tells Dr. Paul that Dr. Dubov hasn't acclimated to the hours here. He's got jet lag.
Paul asks Tatiana how long she's been with Dubov. She says she's known him for 10 years, but has only been with him for 5.
He asks how she got into astrophysics, and she says that she used to work at a flight control center. She learned English because her mother gave her English books as a child. When she was older, she worked as a translator for a scientist who, I believe, defected to Great Britain. I'm trying to follow her story, and she followed him there.
Paul says it's nice talking to her. Thank you, says Tatiana, but we've been talking for 2 days. I've been talking to you, Dubov, says Paul. Now I'm talking to you. Very attractive, he adds. She tells Paul how the guy she followed to Great Britain arranged for her to attend university, and when she returned, she was an astrophysicist.
She was always fascinated by space. That's how she met her husband, a cosmonaut.
She says they were together for 3 years, then he didn't return from an exploratory mission.
Dr. Paul had seemed pretty bummed to find out she was married, and this perks him up a little bit. He asks if she's seeing anyone now, and she says not really.
Then a report comes through from Sir Michael Hughes that there's a cluster of splinters visible over Italy. The people of Italy watch as the meteors sweep through the night sky. Then Sir Michael Hughes reports that the meteors have all burned up in the Earth's atmosphere and this turned out to be nothing more than a fireworks show.
Both Sir Michael and Dr. Paul are chuffed, but then General Adlon is there to crow that this was all a big nothing burger.
It's obvious that all the meteors are going to burn up, and this has all been a colossal waste of time and resources.
And they can all go home now. Dr. Paul is incensed. Orpheus will not burn up in the atmosphere. Harry tells Adlon that they don't need any aggro from him, but Adlon doubles down. Nothing calamitous has happened yet, and so he's leaving, and he won't return until the president puts the center back under his control. And then Dr. Dubov starts throwing a tantrum of some kind, which Tatiana does not translate for us.
Dubov continues raging in Russian as he enters another room and picks up the phone. Tatiana says that he wants to speak with the Russian embassy, and Harry happily goes over to help him. Apparently he knows the number by heart.
It seemed like Harry was upset at first, but then looking back on what this scene means, he must have been pretty excited to realize that this is finally happening. Now we're back at the United Nations, where the Russian delegate announces that they will add their firepower to that of the United States, and he brags that they developed their missile system first before the United States, just to defend against meteors and stuff, and definitely not as a tool of war.
Back down in the station, Paul, Harry, Tatiana, and Dubov are drinking a toast to the cutting of the red tape surrounding the use of the Russian satellite and its weapons.
Vodka shots for everyone. Dubov adds F the Dodgers to his toast.
You did?
Yes, he did.
Now we watch in real time as both satellites' rockets are realigned and their courses diverted.
This is a very long scene. Good for us, but bad for the moviegoers. Rolf Mannheim declares that the situation is nominal, and then they get a report from an observatory.
There is difficulty realigning the rockets on Hercules.
After a quick recalculation, everything is a go for launch. Now we wait till we see the whites of its eyes, says Harry. 0700 Sunday, says Dr. Paul.
Now it's Saturday and we're in the Swiss Alps. A girl skier goes into the lodge.
She's just a skier.
She's credited as girl skier. As she enters the cafe, a meteor strikes the mountain, causing an avalanche. An unfortunate skier is outrun by the crashing snowfall.
Everyone on the ground comes out to watch a wall of snow headed their way. By the time they think to run, it's too late. They get buried in it.
Some try to take cover back in the cafe, but the building is crushed under the snow. Back in the U.S., Paul, Dubov, and Tatiana are watching the newscast on this event. The reporter says that there have been avalanches here before, but nothing like this. Med units are overwhelmed and help is being sent from around the world.
It's an unprecedented disaster with a lot of casualties. The whole tragedy is heightened by the loss of 12,000 contestants in a cross-country ski race. Then they show us actual cross-country ski race footage with the contestants on the ground there. And in order to explain why we don't see them buried by the snow, they say that the helicopter and camera people fortunately got away before the snow hit. And then the newscaster says, the question on everyone's mind is where will tragedy strike next? And what of the big one, closing in on Earth at 30,000 miles per hour, due to hit on Sunday?
In the White House, President Henry Fonda is also watching the report with concern, along with Harry and the Secretary of Defense.
And the reporter says they can only hope that the President of the United States will save us as he promised.
The president turns off the television and asks Harry for an update. Harry says that because of their varying locations, the missiles will have to be launched at different times. The Russian satellite will launch theirs first, then Hercules' missiles will be launched 40 minutes later. Then they will both be in position to meet the meteor at the same time. Maybe. Harry explains that once the missiles have launched, the satellites are programmed to rely on their own internal systems for decision-making. And since this has never been done before, there's no way to tell the odds of the expected and hoped-for outcome. The president asks him what will happen should the mission fail. Then, says Harry, the meteor will impact Earth 2 hours after that. Hit it, Mr. Sherwood, says the president. Get rid of it.
In space, we see that the meteor has now passed the moon. It's pretty darn close. Down in mission control, almost everyone gets another sleep before impact day, but a few people are still awake. Rolf and Dr. Dubov are playing chess, and Dr. Paul watches from an office over their heads as we transition to Sunday.
It's Meteor Day.
Yay.
We're in Tatiana's room. We know it's hers because there are Russian nesting dolls sitting on the dresser. Also, there's a note from Jan. She's given Tatiana the scarf that she had admired. Tatiana is tying it around her neck, and she goes down to see Paul, who's in Adlon's office. She asks him if he's eaten. He says he's had some coffee, and she tells him that solid food works better, and he agrees that she may be right about that. So they head down to the canteen to get some food.
They chit-chat on the way down. She asks about his kids. He has 2, a boy and a girl. And then she wants to know about his falling apart marriage, which she discovered by quizzing Harry Sherwood.
Paul says he'll have to have a talk with Harry. Tatiana apologizes if she was out of line talking to Harry about Paul. But Paul says it's okay. If his Russian was better, he'd have been asking Dubov about her.
He tells her that there's really no reason they're getting divorced. They're just not compatible. He asks if she's ever thought of living anywhere else. He tells her she'd like it here. We've got everything. We've got power cuts, strikes, unemployment, race riots, and a terrific crime rate. But before she can accept that tempting offer, a report comes in that another splinter has hit. This one blew 2 engines off a TWA jet near Hong Kong, and then hit the ocean, causing a 100-foot tidal wave to roll towards the city.
In Hong Kong, there's panic in the streets as people are fleeing the incoming tidal wave. It crashes onto the shore, and the city of Hong Kong is flooded.
We focus in on one man. He tries to save his wife, baby, and dog. They run out of their house, but they can't outrun the wave. It strikes, drowning the entire city, including the family. Then we see the control center that had been reporting into the U.S. is lost as well.
Now it's dawn in America, and President Henry Fonda is making an address to the nation. In 15 minutes, Peter the Great will launch its rockets. Then 40 minutes later, Hercules will launch its rockets. But right now, there is nothing they can do but wait, stay in their homes, have faith, and they'll let them know when the danger is past.
In mission control, we're counting down to the Peter the Great launch, and it goes off without a hitch. And we watch the rockets go into space.
Then General Adlon appears and asks Tatiana to convey his congratulations to Dr. Dubov, and then he apologizes to Dr. Bradley.
Harry accepts on his behalf.
It's now 3 minutes to launch time, and the launch instructions have been relayed to Hercules. But then a transmission from Sir Michael Hughes comes in. He says they've picked up another splinter, a big one, and it's headed their way, the U.S. Eastern Seaboard.
Dr. Paul asks about time of impact, and Sir Michael says, oh, right about now, but we're 90 seconds from launch. We wait, says Dr. Paul. Harry says that if they don't fire, the Russian rockets won't be able to do the job. We wait, says Dr. Paul.
It's now 40 seconds and counting.
And the shard approaches.
At 30 seconds, Jan takes Alan's hand. When the countdown reaches 0, thrusters are fired, and the launch commences.
Phew. Everyone watches as they take off. But then, that meteor splinter blows past the Statue of Liberty, through the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, oh my god, and hits a bunch of buildings, including the AT&T building housing Mission Control. As Manhattan explodes and collapses, so does the Mission Control office. And yet the rockets fly on.
The ceiling starts to fall in. The lighting fixtures fall. Ralph Mannheim is crushed under his desk. Equipment falls from the walls, and the stairway collapses to the ground. And the missiles continue their journey toward the meteor.
Paul pries open the elevator doors, and we see that the shaft is full of debris. Everyone is trapped down there.
Dubov has a large cut in his head, and Paul and Harry pull Ralph Mannheim out from the rubble. Paul checks that Tatiana is all right as she tends to Dubov's wound. Then Paul moves on and finds that General Adlon was crushed and killed by falling debris.
Well, it's just poetic justice for him to come back just in time to get killed. Then that same observatory reports to the backup control center in Houston, where General Easton is manning the cons. We are told that everything is nominal. General Easton calls D.C. to tell the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs that everything is A1 with those rockets and that it's 66 minutes to impact. And they confirm that there's been no contact from New York City and that the city itself is in shambles. And indeed, we see a crater where Manhattan used to be.
Dr. Bradley returns to the others, and Alan asks him to come with him. Paul finds that Jan Watkins was another victim of the destruction. He pulls away some debris to confirm that she's dead, and she is.
Poor Alan. Poor Tatiana. Harry says that they can get out through the support room and that everyone should bring flashlights. He tells Dr. Paul to lead everyone to the subway tunnel and that he'll go pick up the stragglers. But all is not well in the subway tunnel. The walls appear to be cracking, and the wood support beams are creaking.
Paul tells everyone to hold back as he scouts on ahead. Back in Houston, General Easton calls into Washington to inform them that 2 of Peter the Great's rockets have malfunctioned, with 35 minutes, 42 seconds until scheduled impact.
And their margin of error is 5 rockets, so they can't afford to lose many more.
The meteor is not slowing down.
So inconsiderate.
By now, the U.S. rockets have joined the Russian rockets as they approach the meteor.
Down in the subway tunnel, Dr. Paul climbs over a pile of rubble. Something slimy is oozing down the walls there.
Paul returns to the survivors to tell them that the route is clear, but a subway car is blocking the tunnel. As the group moves forward, one of those cracks in the wall starts leaking a lot. Paul, who is still up ahead, looks up a stairwell. The walls groan, and the leak becomes more severe.
At that moment, the cracks in the wall give, and the Hudson River starts punching holes through the tunnel, filling it with jets of muddy water. Harry tries to move everyone through the tunnel, but the onslaught of mud and water is a bit of a deterrent.
Water, mud, and who knows what else rains down upon them as they make their way to the stairwell and ground level. Harry takes a mouthful of river water and falls to the ground, but Paul saves him from drowning and helps him along.
And Orpheus is still approaching, and the rockets are still on their way to meet it. Back in the tunnel, people are still climbing to safety. Some have made it to the escalator. The muddy survivors climb upward to a platform.
Back in Houston, General Eastern reports that one of Hercules' rockets has malfunctioned. Time to impact, 13 minutes, 21 seconds.
Up on that platform, Dr. Paul checks on Dr. Dubov and Tatiana. They're not alone there because a lot of people from the surface level have come down to take refuge. Through Tatiana, Dr. Dubov invites Dr. Paul to Moscow to see a clean subway, and Dr. Paul accepts. And now it's less than 2 minutes to impact, and there have been no more failures. The survivors on the subway platform are listening to a news station from New Jersey because all the New York stations are out of commission. And that station tells us that there have been extensive damages to the city.
And then the first of the rockets strike the meteor. Then a few more do. And then even more. And this is enough to do what they were meant to do, and the meteor is obliterated.
Now we're back on Earth, where New York City, particularly Manhattan, looks pretty bad.
Back down in the subway station, a news report comes over the radio that they are interrupting the story on the tragedy in New York to relay that the mission was successful and the meteor was destroyed. Thanks to the joint efforts of the United States and Russia, the danger is past. The crowd, still trapped in the subway station, starts to cheer, but they're interrupted by the sound of a jackhammer. The rescue team has come for them.
If they jackhammer their way through to rescue the stranded victims. And now, oh my gosh, this movie's almost over, we're at the airport, where Dr. Dubov and Tatiana are getting a hero send-off.
Dubov has a bag of souvenirs, and Paul presents him with a baseball bat with the compliments of the Dodgers. Dodgers, laughs Dubov. Baseball!
Dr. Paul plants a big kiss on Tatiana to tell her goodbye. As they board the plane, turning around to wave at everyone else, Dr. Dubov tells Tatiana that she'll be back someday. Perhaps, she says in Russian, grinning at Dr. Paul.
And then our narrator returns after a long absence to tell us that in 1968, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a plan was designed to deal with the possibility of a giant meteor on a collision course with the Earth. The plan is named Project Icarus.
And then the credits roll, and that's the end.
You're listening to the American International Podcast, and we're discussing Meteor from 1979.
In 1978, the Los Angeles Times did an extensive research piece on the making of Meteor. Over 4 days and dozens of pages, Jerry Cohen and Ronald L. Sobel meticulously reported on everything that went into the making of the movie. The story, the financing, the casting, and the marketing. The majority of our notes on the production of Meteor will come from this piece. According to the article, producer Theodore Parvin conceived the initial story in July of 1975 after reading a Saturday Review magazine article by science writer Isaac Asimov that dealt with the threat of meteorites destroying an entire city. He took the idea to fellow producer Arnold Orgolini, who wasn't enthusiastic until Parvin described a meteor on a collision course with Manhattan. Parvin completed a 20-page outline for the story. Then he and Orgolini commissioned an artist to render 6 sketches illustrating a meteor crash in New York City, and hired a research team to fill in all the gaps in their knowledge about space, meteors, and what the impact of one would do today.
Next, the producers needed to secure the funding for the film. Orgolini launched a team, led by executive producer Gabriel Katzka, to sell the concept at the 1976 Cannes Film Festival market. Katzka had been intrigued by the sketches, and after a short conversation with Orgolini, he put $75,000 in the kitty for pre-production costs and supplied the money to hire a screenwriter. Parvin and Orgolini hired Edmund H. North to write the screenplay, offering him $100,000 to write the script, with another $50,000 if the script was used for the production. North told Orgolini he would write his own story and discarded Orgolini's outline, which by now had changed a local disaster into a global one, where splinters of the meteor would destroy major world cities. Orgolini gave North a research material, which included a 1968 MIT published report on something called Project Icarus, which included a suggestion to use nuclear rockets to deflect an asteroid collision with Earth.
Before North wrote the script, though, he typed up a 4-paragraph summary of his film treatment for Parvin and Orgolini to include in an illustrated brochure that Katzka and Wolf Cohen, another producer, would take to Cannes to try to raise money for the film. While at Cannes, Parvin and Arnold obtained commitments of $6 million from distributors, mostly in the form of memos of agreement. The primary investors consisted of producer Sir Run Run Shaw, a dominant player in the Asian market, Warner Brothers, Inc., Japan's Nippon Herald Films, and American International Pictures, who acquired domestic distribution rights for $2.7 million.
Before he got the job, director Ronald Neame read the script and hated it, though he loved the theme. Orgolini and Parvin also didn't like North's draft, which they had paid him a lot of money to write. Orgolini wanted to hire Neame, who had directed the Poseidon Adventure, and even though he wasn't interested in helming another disaster movie, Neame told the producers that he was willing to do this movie if they gave him a script that removed the contrivances and told a true story. Orgolini and Parvin commissioned another writer, Stephen Bach, to work over North's script. At the same time, they made a list of actors they wanted to cast in Meteor. The person they wanted most was Sean Connery, in part because Warner Brothers, who committed $4 million for international distribution rights, strongly suggested the former Bond actor. That led Orgolini and Parvin to writer Stanley Mann, a friend of Connery's, who doctored the script to appeal to both Neame and Connery, who was on the fence about committing to the film. Mann ended up rewriting the script, with Neame at his side the whole time.
One sticking point for the producers was the introduction of a female love interest into the story. Neame had the idea of creating the role of a female interpreter. By now, the only thing that remained of the first versions of the script was the destruction of major cities, which was a must for the investors. After Connery saw a 60-page treatment of Mann's script, he agreed to be in the movie. Samuel Arkoff was interviewed for the LA Times story and said that he considered himself a gambler, quote, with a strong gut and who likes crises, end quote, who is now betting $2.7 million up front for production and would spend the same amount or more in promotion and marketing. Meteor appealed to Arkoff for two reasons. First, he said, quote, I immediately saw the very fundamental emotional values. And second, the title was good because it was short. One generally likes a succinct title. This one said everything in one word, end quote.
The article said casting for Meteor went smoothly, but also that Neame did most of the battling with the distributing elements over cast selection. Arkoff, who was one of those elements, said, with all due respect to Orgolini and Parvin, they've never really been connected before with a picture of this size or nature. When you hire a star, you want one with commercial value, but you also want the actor to fit the role. Neame felt that he prevailed where it really mattered in conflicts with distributors, and Arkoff thought he got what he asked for, some of the time.
Neame had asked his friend, composer Leslie Bracuse, where he could find an American actress who spoke Russian. Bracuse phoned his friend Natalie Wood, who spoke some Russian. Once cast, Wood, the daughter of Ukrainian immigrants, signed up for Russian language lessons to increase her fluency, especially given all the technical jargon in the script, and also to adopt a Leningrad accent, which she considered more appropriate for the role. The producers and Neame originally wanted a, quote, Jimmy Carter lookalike, end quote, to play the role of the president, and even auditioned a Carter celebrity impersonator named Ed Beller for the role, but ultimately decided on Henry Fonda. Beller told the Times that, quote, being replaced by someone like Fonda eased the pain of my not getting the part.
Donald Pleasance was signed for the part of Dr. Dubov, but withdrew just after shooting began due to a scheduling conflict with his work on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Actor Brian Keith, originally cast as General Adlon, switched roles and replaced Pleasance a week into filming. According to the Times, dialects were Keith's forte, and that he said he had planned to play Adlon with a, quote, redneck accent. That he was proficient in dialects became important when Keith got his new role assignment, but unlike Natalie Wood, he did not speak Russian at all, and so had to pick up enough fluency to speak nothing but Russian over the 12-week shooting schedule, and he had to learn it in 6 days. Keith studied with George Rubinstein, who also worked with Natalie Wood, and told columnist Vernon Scott in a different article that he broke down every line phonetically, read it into a tape recorder, then spent all day on set speaking only Russian, running his lines over and over when he wasn't shooting.
Martin Landau, who had just returned to America after 4 years shooting a TV show in London, was tapped to take the role of General Adlon. By this time, shooting had already begun, so Landau had a lot of catching up to do. The weekend after he was hired, he had to get fitted for uniforms, memorize all his lines. Landau claimed he could do 15 lines an hour, and meet with Neame to smooth out, quote, the bumps in the Adlon role. But by that Monday, he was ready to perform, just not with a redneck accent. Karl Malden's casting upset one distributor. The Times article hints that it was Arkoff, because of Malden's age and that he had been working in television, not movies. Orgolini told this unnamed investor that Malden's hiring was a done deal, but that he, quote, would be closely consulted on the next 3 major hirings, end quote. Malden was excited to take part due to the science-fact nature of the film and the 3 good scenes that he had with Sean Connery.
Parvin went to Tokyo to scout locations, but found the city too new-looking, saying it, quote, had as much oriental atmosphere as the Holiday Inn in which I was staying, unquote. Hong Kong was chosen as the new location for the tidal wave scene. Some footage from the movie Avalanche was repurposed for the scene in Meteor, where a fragment of the main meteor hit a mountain in the Swiss Alps.
Meteor began filming on October 31st, 1977, in a rented studio on the MGM lot. The film's budget at this point was $7 million, though the final total would balloon to $17 million. Set designer Edward Carfano began building more than 24 sets in July of 1977, the costliest of which was a New York subway set. Shooting that scene was set for 7 days at a cost of $1.5 million. Neame used copious amounts of dust filming that scene, much to the irritation of the cast and stunt crew, who complained of sinus and respiratory distress. However, Neame did not relent. A crew of 90 was required to control, quote, about $3,000 worth of a gel-like substance called bentonite that resembled mud and was squirted through ducts on the MGM stage once used for an Esther Williams swimming pool scene. The article says that the mud was finicky and had a tendency not to flow properly when the cameras were rolling. Connery got a mouthful of mud when a technician released it while he was still saying a line, and not after, as the technician was instructed. A journalist witnessed Connery stalking off set after that happened.
Meteor's target release date, set while post-production effects were still being added to the film, was for Easter 1979. The film's actual release date was October 19, 1979. AIP conducted a press junket for the premiere in Flagstaff, Arizona that cost the company $200,000. In attendance at a party held on October 18, 1979, the night before the premiere, were Sam Arkoff and other executives from AIP, as well as stars like Sean Connery, Natalie Wood, Karl Malden, and Martin Landau. Entertainment journalists and NBC's Today Show also planned to attend the premiere party. The day after the party, everyone was shuttled to Meteor Crater, located between Winslow and Flagstaff, which was intended to highlight the fact that a meteor strike on Earth was not only plausible, but that it had happened already. The events included lunch at the Gables, Meteor beer imported from France, information and gift bags featuring the Meteor logo, and helicopter rides down to the bottom of the crater. A pair of astronauts and the governor of Arizona were also scheduled to be there for the dedication of the new Space Travel Hall of Fame at the Meteor Crater. After the Meteor Crater visit, everyone was shuttled back to Flagstaff for the world premiere showing of the film at University Plaza Theater, with a reception to follow.
A Flagstaff restaurant called Ramona's Cantina welcomed the stars of the movie to town by offering them, and everyone else, the, quote, margarita of the future, a meteorita. The restaurant was also giving away tickets to the premiere. Samuel Arkoff told columnist Marilyn Beck that Meteor was the biggest budgeted movie that AIP had ever been involved with, but said, quote, the disaster movie era is pretty much dead. Audiences want escapism fare now, end quote. Beck noted that Love at First Bite was an example of successful escapist fare, as the AIP release was now one of the year's biggest successes. Arkoff also said that the company was suing Lloyd's of London for backing out of their commitment to Meteor after AIP had taken out a completion bond with the company for the project, which, due to special effects reshoots, had gone way over its budget.
Producer Sandy Howard told Marilyn Beck that one of the backers of Meteor, this one from Iran, failed to deliver the money for the film, so he had to go to AIP to ask for more money for production. Taglines for Meteor include, the odds are 33 million to 1.
It's 5 miles wide. It's coming in at 30,000 miles per hour, and there's no place on Earth to hide.
Assault by a meteor is not a possibility, but a clear probability. This is the one.
Roger Ebert, reviewing Meteor on the TV show Sneak Previews with Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, called Meteor, quote, without any question, the most hilarious and competent disaster movie that I have ever seen, and that does include Hurricane, end quote. Ebert mocked the special effects in the scene where the comet hits the meteor and the resulting rubble destroys a spacecraft. Gene Siskel said, quote, the name of the game in a picture like this is we want to see things blown apart. We want to see things destroyed. We want great special effects. This picture is being billed as some sort of expensive movie. I saw it. I didn't see where the money went. It was cheap, playing with blocks kind of special effects. After Star Wars, after Close Encounters, we want real stuff. We don't get it in this picture, end quote. Ebert noted that their special effects sequences were in effect ripoffs of other movies, and that he was expecting an influx of killer bees to come at any time. Siskel said that the producers would have been better off paying for one really good special effects sequence rather than several disappointing ones.
Joe Pollock of the St. Louis Dispatch wrote, as a film in the disaster genre, Meteor is entertaining. It's the sort of movie where there's no time for character development because that would get in the way of the special effects, so everyone gets one or two key sequences for delineation, and it's easy after that. Pollock praised Brian Keith's charming performance in particular, and said the best thing about Meteor is that it does not pretend to be anything except what it is, light, escapist entertainment along with some excellent special effects to evoke plenty of awe along with oohs and ahs.
Charles Champlin of the Los Angeles Times noted that the paper had done a massive write-up on the making of Meteor, and said that, quote, against its own odds, it is, for what it intends to be, uninspired but competent, efficient, commercial, and entertaining, with some random moments that are very nice indeed, end quote. Champlin said that Keith, quote, just about steals the movie from the effects and the rest of the cast, and said, what distinguishes Meteor from other disaster films, quote, is that the human confrontations are done with a good deal of style, and, all things considered, naturalism.
Jackie Tully in the Arizona Daily Star called Meteor fun in the way big trashy movies can be entertaining. This one isn't trashy enough. Sean Connery and Natalie Wood are too serious for their own good, but Samuel Arkoff's space epic is funky enough while it lasts.
Linda Martz, writing for the Mansfield, Ohio News Journal, wrote, quote, one of the things that's nice about the Samuel Arkoff production is that even in its shortest disaster sequences, the camera always trains in on just a few victims, keeping a close eye on their survival or death. That's somehow more touching to a jaded movie watcher than the usual solid quarter hour in which the Manhattan skyline spectacularly falls and thousands fall screaming to their deaths.
Norman Dresser in The Toledo Blade, writing in March of 1980, gave a special acrimony award to American International Pictures, an independent Hollywood studio which used to make trashy cheap movies, and in Meteor, graduated to trashy expensive product. In a year which saw a lot of junky science fiction films, Meteor was a disaster in more ways than one. This movie claimed among its victims a lot of top performers.
Columnist Shirley Eater said Arkoff told her at the premiere, quote, "If I knew going in what the problems and expense of special effects would be, we might never have made Meteor. I don't think we'll ever involve ourselves in this kind of a project. However, if the picture is a moneymaker, I might eat my words." Arkoff did not have to eat his words, though. According to a December 5th, 1979 Variety chart of the 50 top grossing films for the week ending November 28th, 1979, the film's cumulative domestic gross after 6 weeks in theaters was just over $2.4 million. And this is in quotes, a flop that led in part, at least, to AIP being sold to Filmways in 1979 after Arkoff's retirement.
In early 1980, Arkoff told Al Jean Hammett of the New York Times News Service, quote, "If we could have come out as originally planned in the summer of 1978, we would have been fine. By the time it was released, we were concerned because we had a disaster film. We tried to change the emphasis to science, to the meteor, but no matter what we tried to do, we couldn't turn it into a space picture." Arkoff said he expected foreign sales to be much better than the lackluster American box office returns.
At the 52nd Academy Awards, broadcast in 1980, the film was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Sound, with nominations going to the team composed of William McCaughey, Aaron Roshan, Michael J. Coat, and Jack Solomon. But it ultimately lost to Apocalypse Now.
Marvel Comics published an adaptation written by Ralph Macchio and drawn by Gene Colan. Well, Cheryl, Meteor was a doozy, wasn't it?
It was. This is kind of a different episode where we have, instead of a bunch of different sources that we turn to find out how this movie got made and how people got involved with it, we have one source for the most part. And it's this extensive article in the LA Times where they give us all the backstory of how a movie is made. And that was kind of eye-opening for me.
I read those articles, and it probably would have been a book had the movie been more successful.
I mean, there's definitely enough to fill a book, and I think there was probably a lot more they could have added after the fact. They didn't really get too much into detail on the special effects and the problems therein, but I know that there were a lot, and that kind of translates to the screen.
When I watched it the first time, I wasn't paying enough attention and didn't realize that the director had done the Poseidon Adventure, because it kind of felt the same way, I guess, in just that it was a disaster movie with a all-star cast.
Oh, now that they were underground and they had to fight their way to the surface?
Yeah.
I mean, there was a little of the same in both.
I just meant the hero's journey in each one. Something that really stood out to me in this particular film was that story that Harry gives in the bar about his son, because it turns out to be pretty pointless.
It does. They're basically saying that it's better to ask forgiveness than for permission, that they would go ahead and make an end run around the government and make this happen. And then once they save the world, they're not going to go to jail. What he's describing is a much more interesting movie that doesn't happen.
No, I guess that's plan B because everything works out and they don't have to resort to it.
No, but how much more fun would this movie have been if it was a caper movie where they have to sneak into the control center and arm the rockets and get the Russians on their side without anyone knowing about it. And then they have to fight their way out. And I mean, it just could have been so cool. The germ of a great idea was sitting there and they just kicked it to the side.
Yeah, but I think that's a lot more ambitious than anything that this film was trying to do.
No, they're playing it very straightforward.
And again, looking at those articles, it's interesting the history of this film because they're getting all this financing based on their idea. They had a treatment. They didn't have a script that anybody could agree on. It was rewritten several times by several different writers, which is why we have, I think, 2 writers credited as well as 2 people with the original story who came up with the original concept.
Plus, Stephen Bach doesn't get a credit, but he's in the mix somewhere. Sounds like a little bit of everyone's iteration of the script made it to the final.
And according to the articles, this is kind of the way movies are made. But to my knowledge, this is pretty atypical trajectory for a film to take from beginning to completion.
Maybe it's because special effects were a lot bigger than they had been in the past.
It was going to be a big budget movie. That was obvious. But they also started this in 1975, which is around the time Star Wars was just getting off the ground. It wouldn't be out for 2 more years. And Star Wars was the movie, obviously, that changed special effects forever. You had to do at least as good as Star Wars to be taken seriously.
And that's probably where all the add-ons to the budget came from. Once they knew that they had this competition, they would have to equal or better.
And you can't compare this to Star Wars, a movie that I will admit that I'm not a huge fan of. But the special effects in this, I'd say they're adequate. The shots of the satellites, though, they look like toys.
They do. One part of an article that I read, I didn't quote it, but someone compared them to ballpoint pens. It's not impressive at all.
And I don't know if that's a disappointing aspect, but it does take me out of the movie to see something that looks so obviously fake. I don't know what a real satellite would look like, if it would look that clean. These were very, very clean. Mm-hmm. And the ships of Star Wars are all filthy dirty, which is part of why they look real, because it looks like my car.
Space junk. Yeah, because apparently they've been orbiting for several years and there's a lot of debris in space. But another thing that was kind of disappointing was the actual meteor. They weren't able to really give it enough scale to show us how lethal it was going to be.
No, when you see the rockets going against it, it doesn't look like it's 5 miles in diameter.
Because the rockets look so tiny. This is a big budget special effects movie, and it really falls down at that point. But there's also other aspects that you have to consider, and one is the story, and then the other is the acting. There was one aspect of the story that I just didn't understand, and that's the beginning when Karl Malden is describing how his character sent the shuttle to go watch the comet hit the meteor belt. To me, that's obviously stupid. Of course, when the comet hits one of those asteroids, it's going to blow a bunch of debris in all directions, and anything in its vicinity is going to be totaled. What was he thinking?
He was probably working under the assumption that it wasn't going to hit the obvious biggest target available. It might hit a smaller one and not cause any real damage, but...
Why wouldn't you assume the worst case scenario at that point when you're putting human lives in jeopardy?
He doesn't have to listen to this.
And that leads me to the performances, where I felt like there was a lot of anger in this movie, but there wasn't a whole lot of humanity. There were little touches of it, and I could probably pick them off, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on my one hand. The greatest of which is Brian Keith's performance. Brian Keith is a hoot in this movie, and I think if he wasn't in this movie, I would hate it. He saved it for me.
He's pretty amusing as the Russian Dr. Dubov. I assume that his Russian is good. I don't speak Russian. I don't understand it at all. But I didn't understand a word he said, so it sounded like I could be Russian to me.
But the fact that he never got to speak English, and he still conveyed so much to us, the audience, with his mannerisms, his facial expressions, I think that is worthy of kudos. There's a lot of people glowering and glaring and throwing tantrums in this movie, but there's not a lot of humanness, and you need to see that in a movie where humankind is about to be obliterated. What are we even saving? So we had the nice moment where Jan and Tatiana were bonding and becoming pals, and the little love story between Jan and Alan. But these are all tiny little side things that happen, and they're just not really representative of the movie as a whole.
So you feel something when Jan is killed when the building collapses.
But then I stopped feeling things after that.
I mean, the only people that we see that matter were Rolf Mannheim, because we were interested in him and we saw him playing chess. And I guess he was okay. I think they carried him out after he got crushed by the desk, but he was injured.
Pulled it off of him.
They were carrying him out. I don't think they dropped him in the flooding river.
I don't remember him being on the subway platform, though.
They might have dropped him, now that I think about it.
We didn't really get a list of survivors and casualties. We know Alan survived because he was at the airport crying when everyone was leaving.
Sean Connery was pretty much the grouchy old man throughout this entire movie.
It's really funny. In the very beginning, he gives these looks, and they're just so out of proportion to everything that's happening. When he looks back at the Coast Guardsman who said he would have rammed his boat, it's just such a mean, nasty look.
You got to think of it from his perspective. He's retired. He's being called back into work. He's probably not going to get paid for this.
No, and it's at the worst possible moment. He's about to win a boat race. He really wants that trophy, and they can't wait till it's over, which actually they could have.
Yeah, they still had 5 days or whatever. 3 days, 7 days, 6 days. How many days they had.
I suppose it depends on how much longer that boat race was going to last.
So I don't understand the science, not necessarily the movie, but just in general. What would happen if you exploded a missile against an asteroid in space?
I think it depends on where you're doing it. And the fact that they waited until it was between the Earth and the moon, I believe you can never guarantee that all those fragments of the meteor would just go off harmlessly in space. By now, you're within the Earth's orbit.
Well, most of them would probably be small enough that they would burn up.
And then the rest would just orbit the Earth forever? Is that what they were thinking?
That's what they were hoping for. They said as much.
Because I just think a few would probably shoot down to Earth. There would be more collateral damage.
I didn't notice much of the score standing out in this movie, except whenever they showed the shot of the meteor hurtling through space, there was kind of this sound going throughout the music.
They also had that wah sound too. Did you know that John Williams was supposed to do the score on this, but then he backed out?
I don't blame him. I'm sure he had better things to do.
I'm sure. I think there's a bit of Superman in this movie too. The shots from space made me think of Superman.
The opening credits are kind of similar, but they look like a cheap version of the Superman the movie credits.
Do you think had this movie really been successful, would American International Pictures have maybe carried on for a little longer?
Okay, well, I think that if this movie had been successful, they still might have gone into Filmways because they probably would have felt they needed to keep this level of budget going, and AIP couldn't make that money on their own. They needed a bigger company behind them to fund them to keep this kind of budget. You look at their most successful film, which would come out the same year, was the Amityville Horror, which required a much smaller budget. The effects shots in that consist of, flies and a couple of glowing eyes in a window.
And I don't know if I got this date right or not, but I did read this in an article that Samuel Arkoff retired officially from AIP in July of 79. So that was before this movie even came out. If we factor in the fact that this movie was supposed to come out a year earlier than it did, maybe if it had come out earlier and if it had made a bundle, maybe they could have made at least one more movie with this kind of money.
Yeah, that might have changed things a little bit.
But he was going to retire anyways. There was no one like him to take over the company.
No, it probably would have been Lou Arkoff.
The guy who turned down Alien?
Yeah, the guy who turned down Alien.
They were doomed.
I thought that casting Henry Fonda worked really well. I think he had a very presidential look to him.
He reminded me not of Jimmy Carter, but of President Joe Biden. He's very old. He's kind of frail looking, but he has the gravitas of a president. But can you imagine a Jimmy Carter impersonator doing that?
I think that would have dated the movie more than it already is.
True, and then it would just appear ridiculous. You needed somebody that could be a stern but emotional grandfather in this role.
But still seem like he could be the president during any time period.
I think one of the quotes I read was that the $50,000 they spent on Henry Fonda was money well spent. And I agree. So too bad, Ed Beller.
So Cheryl, how are you going to rate Meteor using our AIP scale where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic?
Well, first of all, I don't think this is a pathetic movie because you're looking at a competent movie that has a story that has a beginning and an end and everything seems to make sense. There are moments that make you wonder, like this could have been done better and perhaps the science isn't entirely accurate. Not that I would know, but as movies go, it's fine. The acting, like I said, is competent. I just don't have anything that's going to lift it up to an A for awesome for me. I've seen much better disaster movies, like The Poseidon Adventure, for one, and I've seen worse. So it just hits in the middle for me. It's intermediate in every way that matters. And I don't think we have to watch it again. You can watch it, though. What do you think, Jeff?
This is tough because you're right. There are definitely better disaster movies. And when comparing it to other disaster movies, this one's going to be low tier for sure. But I still really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was fun for what it is. I mean, the threat doesn't seem too stressful. Maybe it's because nobody seems to be taking it too seriously. These guys are pretty optimistic that this is going to work. I mean, the worst case scenario is it doesn't, but they don't really deal with what's going to happen if it doesn't. They just say it might not work. So I don't know what their plan is to do in that event, but they're pretty confident this is going to work as long as everybody does what they tell them to. And that's where the drama is getting the government to work in your favor and to cut all the political red tape surrounding this operation. So I don't think this is a bad movie at all. I think it's actually pretty good. But if you do compare it to other movies, then it does fall short. So I'm not sure where to place this because I want to give it like 4 stars, but I don't know that it's worth the upgrade to an A. We need to change our rating system.
Well, we've given A- before. We've given I+. So it sounds to me like it's hitting somewhere between an A and an I. It's a high-level I or a low-level A for you.
It is. So because you went with I, I'm going to go with the high-level A because then our letterboxed score will be a 4-star, which is where I want to put it.
So you're really giving it a 5 stars to my 3?
Just so we can average it out, yeah.
I didn't think we were supposed to do our ratings so that they averaged out to a particular...
Well, I'm making an exception because Meteor is better than a 3-star movie.
I would say 3.5, but that's still I, isn't it?
I would raise it to 4, so this one has to be 5 because we don't have 4. So yeah, Meteor is a 5-star movie.
Well, I will agree that it is escapist fare. I don't know what Samuel Arkoff was saying that these kind of movies aren't escapist because, we don't think this is going to happen right away. It might happen someday, but we're not planning for an imminent meteor attack. So to me, it is escapist. It's a way to worry about something in space that's not happening as opposed to all the junk on Earth that is happening. We need to escape from.
It is interesting to see the story told in the late 70s because now we have a plan in place for this kind of thing. You send up Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck and everything's taken care of. Back then, Bruce Willis hadn't even made his film debut in The First Deadly Sin yet. So that wasn't even an option. So they had to come up with this other story.
But Jeff, we have to come up with another option now because Bruce Willis is no longer capable of defending this great planet.
I don't want to hear it.
I don't either. And I don't think Ben Affleck is really up to the task either if you want to get down to it.
Then let's just hope this isn't something we ever have to worry about.
Let's keep it theoretical. While Meteor may have been a disaster in more ways than one, our website is out of this world. At AIPPod.com, you'll find our entire library of episodes dating back to when we started, just over 3 years ago. You'll also find a contact form where you can message us directly. Tell us which movie you are most looking forward to us reviewing, make a comment on something we've said, or help us track down some AIP movies missing from our library. There's a list of what we're looking for on the site. While you're there, you can indulge in your love of all things AIP as we are building a database of the entire American International Pictures catalog as we go through it. We have lobby cards, posters, trailers, and other advertising materials on display, and you can see where to find these films so that you can enjoy them on your own. While you're on our site, consider going to our store, as a purchase of one of our offerings helps keep the podcast rolling every week. Once again, you'll find us at AIPPod.com.
So now we can breathe a sigh of relief as the crisis of Meteor has passed, but we will be returning next week to explore another forgotten delight from the AIP vaults. Until then, I'm Jeff Markin.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
And in space.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.